So we can start.
Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Global Franchise Leaders Forum. My name is Sachin Maria and I'm the President for Franchise India. Every week on a Friday, we bring you a global expert from the industry of franchising to share with us, best practices, opportunities, and also potential challenges that we are experiencing these times. So hope all of you are well. And we today is a very special edition when we are also broadcasting this webinar on our annual, franchise show and licensing show, which is happening alongside. So some of you might be joining in from our 6Connex platform. So without much ado, I welcome my guest this afternoon in India and evening in Malaysia, Mr. Troy Franklin. Before I move to him, a bit about him. Let me pull out the presentation. So Troy is one of the finest names in the franchise fraternity with about 30 years of experience that he brings in international franchising. His experience spans in about 70 odd countries that he's really helped brands expand. That's phenomenal. And in 2014, he partnered with a few senior colleagues from the industry, and he's a partner and director of WFA. Somebody I've known personally for a very long time, and have worked together in various projects. Here I welcome Troy Franklin. Hello, Troy. Welcome.
Greetings, Sachin, and thank you for the introduction.
I'll be joined by Gaurav in a while. He's stuck and he's joining in a while, but thank you very much for taking time. And we had a brief chat early this week, and we were sharing about how you are seeing some opportunities and quite a few challenges in the COVID space, COVID times. And you also spoke about your couple of markets that you're seeing have done extremely well. So I would like to sort of want you to start your presentation. I know you're going to give a presentation first, and then we'll take on some of the questions from the audience.
Sure, Sachin. Before I start the presentation, let me wish everyone a good day there in India, wherever you may be, or anyone joining us from any other countries. I'm going to talk about franchising in the time of COVID, and before I start the presentation, I just want to say two things. The first is that franchising is something we take great joy in being involved in, and it's an area that I've been involved in for more than 30 years, an area I have great expertise in, and as does our company, World Franchise Associates. COVID, which is a topic I'm going to speak to today, is an area that I'm not an expert in. I'm sure very few people on this call are an expert in this field. However, it's affecting us all deeply in every aspect of our life. And just to be sensitive to the audience, if any of you have had your family impacted from a health or economic standpoint from COVID, then our deepest sympathies to you and your family. And we don't take this topic lightly. I want to just make that clear. The next point I want to make is that I'm an optimist. My glass is always half full, and I believe that in any crisis, you can't crawl into a hole and bury yourself. You have to find a way to turn the challenge into an opportunity. So myself and my partners in World Franchise Associates, certainly have had to deal with this like everyone else, but we've looked at this and said, we can't control it, but we can control what we do, how we act, how we manage our relationships, and in short, make the best of a bad situation. So on that note, I'll start into my presentation. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions, and I'd love to talk to you and discuss these opportunities and challenges more. So the topic is franchising in the time of COVID-19. I'm going to spend some time on this. I'm going to focus on the Asia Pacific region. I'm an American, but I've lived for more than 30 years in this region, and manage World Franchise Associates business across the region. And in my 30 years, I've lived in 6 countries across the region. So it's an area that I have a great interest in. And I'm speaking to you from Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia today. So briefly, a presentation summary. The first thing I'm going to do is briefly introduce myself and my company, World Franchise Associates. I'm going to talk about COVID-19 and franchising, including pre-COVID franchise trends, what was happening before COVID, the impact of COVID, the COVID pandemic on franchising, with focus on Asia, and then give you a bit of a post-COVID franchise outlook about what the future holds for franchising. Then I'm going to share some wisdom on one of the topics that I speak on about acquiring a franchise, and what does it take to acquire a franchise briefly. That's a full presentation, but I'll give you a couple of nuggets of wisdom on that. And then I'm going to show you some franchise opportunities very quickly that are available in India and across the Indian subcontinent and Asia and the Middle East region and elsewhere. So very quickly, my company, World Franchise Associates, we're a UK company. We're owned and operated by franchise experts with many years of franchise industry expertise and experience. And we're based in different parts of the world. We run an associates network and have associates across different parts of the world. And effectively, what we do is we run services for brands who want to expand internationally, and we run services for people or companies that want to acquire brands. So for brands expanding internationally, we run an international franchise and marketing and sales program. We have a franchise development program which helps brands with systems, tools, and processes when they want to get started franchising. We help conglomerates and wealthy individuals around the world acquire franchises through our franchise investor advisory program. And we also have done government and institutional work with governments that are looking to institutionalize franchising into their government platform in support of SME growth in their countries. We've done work in Malaysia and Saudi Arabia and Qatar on this platform, and currently talking to other governments around the world. Myself, I think Sachin has introduced me. I won't spend too much time on this. My role in WFA is I'm an executive, but I'm also a partner and director of the company, and involved in the strategic development and moving our company forward. In this role and in my previous roles, I've had the honor to travel to more than 70 countries. I've had the honor to meet some incredible people, learn about some incredible cultures, and specific to India, I've known Gaurav and Sachin and their family for probably close to 20 years, and had been to India both for business and pleasure many times, and exception of the Northeast, have been to most parts of your beautiful country. I've worked with major brands such as Carl's Jr. and Gloria Jean's Coffees. I've opened businesses like Gold's Gym, Tower Records, and service-related businesses in new markets. So my experience spans across a variety of different franchise sectors, including food, services, and retail. We operate effectively as a consultancy company using an omni-channel platform. We have a World Franchise Center, which is a resource for investors to match themselves and find brands. We publish a high quality coffee table style World Franchise Review magazine, which is highly sought after. We do our own events, and we participate with major events as a co-partner and sponsor. We've done the Franchise India event in Delhi a number of times. I've had the pleasure to work with Franchise India on a lot of their activities. We do a monthly franchise newsletter called FranSpeak, and we organize international franchise discovery meetings and matchmaking events for clients around the world. Very quickly on our World Franchise Center, this is a portfolio that has 200 brands from 30 countries. And if someone is looking for a franchise, no matter where they're from, this is probably one of the most extensive sources of franchise opportunities. You can see the tiles on the left, the main categories: food and hospitality, B2B and B2C services, retail, fitness and sports, children's, etc. And then there are many subcategories under this. So if you're out looking for or wishing to acquire a franchise, this could be a great resource for you to find one. So let's move to from the introduction of WFA to the discussion about COVID and its impact on the industry. So I'm running this from an Asian perspective. I'll use some Asian relevance in that 2020 is in the Chinese zodiac the year of the rat, and the Lunar New Year starts on the 25th of January. And at that time, frankly, there was a lot of optimism in the world about the new decade. We just entered into the 2020s. Um, by and large, the world was doing well. Globalization was a key topic. There was reasonably good economic prosperity. Emerging markets around the world were growing. I mean, Myanmar, a neighbor to us between India and where I'm at in Malaysia, was I think at 8 or 9% growth. Um, so other than some macro world challenges, which are typically geopolitical, 2020 started and was looking to be a good year. Of course, that was offset by what happened in March when the COVID virus came along, and effectively by the end of March, um, the COVID pandemic had taken over and had become the global topic, and we went from the year of the rat to the year of the mask, unfortunately. So let's talk briefly about what was going on in the franchise world in 2018, 2019, pre-COVID, because this is going to be very relevant to what happens in 2021 and beyond. So these are two slides of global franchise trends pre-COVID. One is that international expansion or globalization was happening at a faster rate than ever. The ratio of American brands opening outside of the U.S., opening their units or their franchises outside of the U.S. was, I believe, 2-1 over the U.S. Um, there are franchise associations in 80, 90 countries. There's no continent in the world that doesn't have franchises on the ground in the continent, and franchising has really become truly a global business. The other thing is that emerging markets were becoming a top priority. I mean, there was research done um, at the end of last year that indicated that certain high population, young demographic emerging markets, Vietnam being an example, Indonesia being an example, were among the most attractive countries in the world to target for franchising. Another trend that we were seeing was a growth in demand for specialized services. Um, it used to be, food was the biggest franchise sector, and it was the earliest. So obviously there are more food franchises, but we're seeing a lot of interest and demand for services, maintenance and home services, and various other types of specialized health-related services. Um, growing faster now than ever, and both in developed and emerging markets. Another trend is the growth of health, fitness, and wellness, uh, particularly in the small box and niche fitness segment, spinning, kickboxing, um, no frills fitness brands have really started to expand globally. Children focused franchises. There are more children's focused franchises out there now than ever before. They could typically relate to education, but they can also relate to fun and fitness and fashion and retail. Another trend was the rise of mobile franchises. Uh, Again, more and more mobile franchises, coming up and emerging, uh, both in developed and emerging markets. A few more trends for you. This one at the top, increased use of technology, is probably deserves a spot at the top of the first page. If you're not investing and using current day technology in your franchise business, you can't avoid it much longer, because everything is being built around technology. So franchises that are embracing technology are thriving, and those that are not are going to find it difficult to compete. And and franchising and technology and franchising has become cheaper than ever before. Examples: cloud-based systems, um, meeting-based systems like Zoom that we're using now, um, you know, business management and accounting systems. They're not near as costly as they used to be, and they're much easier to use. In the food sector, casual and premium fast casual restaurants have been a trend. Fast food, or quick service, has become very saturated. Some of the quick service and fast food franchises have been around 50 or 60 years internationally. And with the growing affluence in emerging markets and the growing demand for things that are different, we've seen the casual and premium fast casual segment um, see a boost in growth. In hand with that is healthy menu options. We're seeing that more and more people are looking for franchises that offer healthy choices. Poke bowls, salad concepts are some examples. Moving on, non-traditional franchise entrants, hotels and motels, which typically used to be joint ventures or licenses, are now starting to adopt franchise models. And we're seeing this with financial businesses and technology businesses that typically wouldn't be treated as a franchise, but are now seeing that franchising as a business format provides a great opportunity for them to expand and build brand equity. Another big trend is social conscious, and brands or franchises with a social conscious, and and willing to give back to their home markets and in the markets where they do business. Not because it's good publicity, but because they have a heart for it, and they want to you know leave the world a better place than they found it. And then another trend, which is really taking hold, is what we're calling cloud ghost or host kitchens. I'm sure that in India these are popping up, and we're seeing a number of these concepts um, thriving in all regions of the world. We're also seeing major brands set up and operate these on their own and with their franchisees in places like Dubai and Singapore, where rents are very high. And we've just started a business relationship with a company out of the UK called K-Box, which has a phenomenal um, system for the Ghost and Host Kitchen franchises, which we're helping them expand internationally. So let me just share some hard truths. I know that we're all living in the same time, so I'm not going to go into these in great detail, but you've got experts from the London School of Economics, Harvard, Time Magazine, the United Nations Development Program, using words like major shock, fastest decline in trade flows in history, assaults against globalization. I mean, there's no doubt that we are living in unprecedented times, and and that in many cases nobody saw it coming, and many people and many governments have struggled to manage it and deal with it. Some have done better than others, of course. In Southeast Asia, I'll share briefly this chart. There have been a few crises in Southeast Asia since 1963. I can remember the ones in 1997 and 2003. I wasn't born in 1963, so I can't tell you about that one. But in 1997, we had an Asian financial crisis, and and it was a very severe shock to the region because it affected currency values and equity markets, and it saw the region fall into some turmoil, and it took multiple years for some of the countries to climb out of this. And even the 2008 global financial crisis, although it hit some countries harder than other, it wasn't as bad on the Asia Pacific as the Asia financial crisis, as you can see from the graph. Uh, what we're seeing with COVID, although 2020 is not over, is it's going to result in a negative regional growth, which will be worse than the Asian financial crisis. And then there's the dotted line is an anticipated bounce back in 2021. So obviously the impact of COVID on the Asia Pacific has been material. This is from the International Monetary Fund, by the way. In in the region, one of the big impacts on the socioeconomic or the economy and trade and investment has been um, lockdowns and travel restrictions, and I won't go into this in detail. And some of this is changing and evolving every day due to rebounds of the virus and second wave. I think they call it second wave. But what you see here is that every single country across Asia had travel restrictions during the crisis, and in fact, most of the countries are still um, implementing travel restrictions. Some countries had strict lockdowns. The lockdowns evolved from strict lockdowns to movement control orders. And in fact, many of the countries still have measures in place that limit gatherings in large groups. So clearly, we're not out of the woods yet. And countries that were credited with doing a great job, um, such as South Korea and Vietnam, which have been recognized worldwide as having done a great job, have had a couple of irresponsible institutions or irresponsible people, spoil their record by becoming super spreaders and making the situation worse. So, franchising in the pandemic. These are some fundamental truths about franchising that were true before the pandemic, and I want to explain how they've become magnified, or the pandemic has magnified them. So all successful franchise brands, regardless of where they're from, are built on three foundational um, principles. The first is a profitable business model. If you're not profitable, you can't expand. And if you don't expand and build a network, you can't franchise it. A competitive market position. You can be profitable and not competitive, in which case your position erodes and you lose profitability. And again, you're not in a strong position to franchise. And franchising, being a long-term brand equity strategy, requires committed ownership and committed leadership. And so these three are the key foundations to being able to take your business from a successful business to a successful franchise and a successful international franchise. Now, the pandemic has impacted these factors dramatically, because the pandemic has shaken the profitability of many of these businesses in their home market. I mean, imagine you have a 300 chain F&B brand that's closed for 2 months, and you're dealing with that in your home market. There's no easy solution, and and it's going to affect your profitability and potentially your competitiveness. Some businesses and brands have shuttered and closed down permanently during this crisis. If you look online, a number of brands, iconic brands even, that have been around for years. California Pizza Kitchen was one I read about this morning, have filed for bankruptcy. Um, of course, when you're dealing with the problem at home, you don't pay much attention to your neighbors and your friends, or you can't afford to. So when a franchise is dealing with their home issues in their home market, they often take their eyes off of their franchisees, and that often starts with their international franchisees, because they're less familiar with what's going on in those international markets. And then third, you would have seen, and I'm sure in India you're experiencing some of the same. There have been a lot of retrenchments and furloughing of people. Unemployment in the UK is I'm told 25%. Unemployment in the US is more than 10%. These are all-time highs in our lifetime, and this is affecting people on the ground. And many of these people are in key positions in international franchise businesses, and they're fantastic at what they do, very capable, and are just in the wrong job at the wrong time. And so when these people lose this type of talent, then that affects their particularly their short-term commitment, and it affects their ability to lead and guide franchises through the pandemic. So just a few more of the negative points. Very few franchise businesses or business in general are immune to the pandemic. Any franchise in a brick and mortar format in a country where there's been lockdowns or movement control orders would have had a major hit. And of course, with the global travel restrictions, anyone involved in franchising and in tourism and businesses that rely on franchise businesses that rely on tourism and hospitality would have been badly affected, probably more than anyone else. I mean, airlines, hotels, as you can see, are really struggling. Fine dining in the F&B sector has taken a big hit. They can't evolve and deliver. They're selling an experience. Cafes, a cappuccino is hard to deliver hot and delicious. Uh, Cafes is a third place for people to gather when they're locked down. People can't go. Bars, of course, nightclubs, entertainment franchises have been badly hit, and uh, and the job losses are affecting consumer confidence, which is affecting the entire industry. So those are the negatives. A few of the positives. While most franchise businesses have been hit badly, as I've talked about in the previous two slides, it's not all doom and gloom. Franchises operating in an essential services category have actually thrived during this pandemic. Anyone involved in convenience stores and hypermarkets, pharmacies, and the like. Cleaning service franchises have tended to do very well. Cleaning and disinfectant. Any franchise businesses with strong delivery element and uh, delivery platform. Pizza brands in the U.S. are actually having maybe higher year-on-year sales this year than last. A lot of the grab-and-go brands that deliver are doing well. Franchises that had a strong online distribution platform prior to COVID have done better than others. And then franchises that have a delivery element and offer value or affordability have tended to do well because of the fact that people are tightening their purse strings. So this is just some examples of brands that didn't have to adopt so much, but were not as badly hit by the COVID virus. And then there's brands that adopted quickly, knowing that they had to survive. So many of the fitness franchises went to online classes very quickly. A couple of our clients, Snap Fitness and 9 Round Kickboxing, have adopted and gone to online. Education franchises, we have a client called Mathnasium that was very quick to move to the online franchise offering and has done very well with that. retail brands that have, as I said, evolved their shopping platform. Online shopping have done well. People are ordering to have their the products delivered at home, and then some F&B brands who have launched full or limited delivery services have been able to make up for the loss of in restaurant dining. Um, Again, another positive is that if you look at the impact of COVID on franchising, the number of franchise businesses that have been impacted is very high, but the independents and the small businesses and the mom and pops have been much more badly hit by COVID than the franchise businesses. And there's some strength in numbers and the ability to shelter under a big umbrella as franchisees that have made being a part of a franchise system a good thing. And that's due to big franchise companies and even medium-sized companies have strong leadership, and they know how to they understand crisis management. They have economies of scale which have helped them weather the business in terms of their relationships, and then they have brand awareness and brand loyalty, and people are remembering them during these difficult times. So again, not all doom and gloom um, in terms of the franchise sector. So what's it gonna look like when this is all over? There's a saying, "This too shall pass," and I think that's a fact with COVID. The $1 million question is when, and depending on the experts or the countries that people are the experts are from, um, this varies dramatically. But everyone knows that the development of a vaccine, which many countries are working round the clock to create, and the development of better treatments such as plasma and other drugs is really going to make a difference with this. Um, and in fact, some countries are already seeing they're on the other side of the curve. I mean, while you may be at the front or the top of the curve in India, the same in the United States, I suppose, in places like Brazil. There are countries in Malaysia is a great example, Thailand, which case counts are down to less than 10 a day, and they're looking for ways to try to um, through government initiatives boost the economy and bring back business. Um, and again, broadly, franchise businesses are expected um, to pick up, where they left off before, um, whatever the new normal looks like, and the optimism that franchising will become will pick up where it left off is very high. This was the case in the Asian financial crisis in 1997. It was the case in the 2008 global financial crisis. Franchises came out of the crisis on stronger footing than many other businesses. So I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said, "Out of adversity comes opportunity," and we believe this. And I have a quote here from Babette Marshur Wood, who is one of the senior lawyers at Denton's, which is in terms of number of lawyers, the largest law firm worldwide. And I won't read the quote, but effectively you can read it um, on the screen. And what she's saying essentially is that franchising as a business format offers a great way to exit COVID in terms of new investments and new opportunities relative to investing in new businesses. And I think this is true everywhere. And then you also have a lot of unemployed people as a result of COVID who might look to invest in franchises or seek opportunities with franchises. So when we come out of this, we're very optimistic, as many others are, that it's going to be looking up for franchising. A bit more on the post-COVID outlook. These are things that were relevant before COVID in terms of why you would expand internationally, and they're will be more relevant post-COVID. Franchising creates a new and diversified income source. It reduces your dependence on growth and performance in your home market. It helps you hedge against economic swings and currency devaluations in your home market. It allows you to leverage your intellectual property. It allows you to trade in markets that are less saturated. And all this creates added value for stakeholders. So I can tell you there's a lot of brands in the world that wish they were more diversified, less dependent on core markets, and had hedged and spread their risk because of COVID than there were before COVID. And a lot of people are going to be thinking about this more post-COVID than they were before COVID. Just some wisdom to carry forward. Some of this comes from a gentleman named David Singleton, who is an experienced franchise expert and franchise consultant, and he recently contributed a story on COVID to our France Speak newsletter, and and effectively, these are David's thoughts on what is going to be things that are going to be looked at differently post COVID. Beyond four walls, delivery is going to evolve from nice to have to have. I think that's happening already, even as we speak. Um, the need to localize more and source more locally. Globalization is the word he used. Becomes more important. Realizing the disruption in shipping and transport that we experienced during COVID. Having local sources is going to be more critical in people's minds going forward. Liquidity. Um, Liquidity is getting people through this crisis, and lack of liquidity is finishing people off. A lot of the companies that have gone under were companies that didn't have sufficient liquidity to have a 90 to 180 day downturn, and they were just on the brink. So managing your portfolio for maximum liquidity needs to be more and more importantly looked at. Market entry, again, this ties into liquidity, making sure that your international platform, your partners around the world are on stable footing so that they don't get knocked off their feet by something like this, or that they at least are in a situation where they can come out of it and regroup. And due diligence and making sure you have strong partners. These are things that are going to be more important post-COVID. Um, the other things that are going to become more relevant are people are going to start talking more about the fees. Knowing what's happened during the crisis with the ability to get help from franchisors, they're going to say, look, I'm taking a lot of risk. I might not want to pay what you were asking before. There's going to be a lot more focus on collaboration. Um, on the subject of people, there are some really talented people out there looking for work, and these people can bring skills and capability to companies that are looking to expand internationally. There's a lot of clauses on force majeure and acts of God and master franchise agreements and franchise agreements, and nobody really thinks much about them. But I can tell you for sure, this outbreak has caused people to start talking about this more and more than ever. People can't pay royalties. This is an act of God, or this is force majeure. Well, it doesn't say that in your contract. It's not defined. And I can assure you that franchise lawyers all over the world are licking their chops because they're going to get to write a lot of new agreements with new clauses about these things when we're beyond this virus. And again, on this point about technology, if you don't embrace it, you'll be left behind. It's more critical than ever, and in 2021, it'll become more and more critical. So that's my topic, my COVID topic. I hope that has been helpful. I'm going to run 4 or 5 slides here just on what it takes to be successful in franchising, and these come from a much longer presentation that I give at franchise expos and to clients. So my take on franchising is it's about the head and the heart. And you can't have one without the other and be successful in this business. And somebody that I admire, Nelson Mandela, said it himself: a good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. And if I relate this to franchising, you in franchising, if you're going to acquire a franchise, you have to have a heart for the business you're going to acquire. If you don't have the enthusiasm and a positive attitude and believe in relationships and have a dedication to the time that you have to put into it, then no matter how smart you are and how much capital you have, you'll have a tough time making the business successful. So having the right heart, and the right emotional connection and attitude towards the business, as a belief that the business is going to generate the kind of revenue and help you create the kind of reputation and image you want, is very critical. But that alone won't be the secret to success. Excuse me, without the head for the business. In other words, if you have the heart for the business but you don't understand the economics, how the business makes money, the aptitude have the aptitude to understand how to run the business, how to apply the intellectual property and the technology, and how to grow and scale the business in your home market, then even with the heart, you'll struggle with these key areas. So when a franchisor looks at a potential master franchisee, or when a franchise master looks at a franchisee, they often have interviews and questionnaires, and the interviews and questionnaires that deal with both head and heart issues are the one that are going to help identify the best fit. And you, as a person looking into franchises, need to examine your own what's in your own head and your own heart when you look at buying a franchise. Always first things first. I mentioned earlier about what are the most important things. If you look at a franchise, is it profitable? Is it competitive? And are they committed to are they 100% committed to international franchising? If all three of these are yes, then take a look. If one of these or two of these are no, then look for something else. Because without these three, it doesn't matter how much you like the brand or how well the brand is recognized, there's a problem with the foundation, and you can't build something strong on a weak foundation. Um, these are the foundations for international success. Beyond those 3 points I just gave you, a franchisor or a brand has to have excellent master franchisees and franchisees. They have to have effective systems and operations platforms, experienced, energetic, and focused team, international team, strong leadership, great franchisor franchisee relationships, a sound business and financial model. And they have to remember the customer pays us and the customer comes first. Lastly, I'll leave you with what I call my 8 P's to franchising perfection. When I teach and coach franchisors about how they can be successful, these are the 8 P's that come into the discussions, starting with platform and process. What kind of foundation is your business built on, and what kind of systems, tools, and processes do you have? Then you have to have purpose and plan. Do you have a business plan? Do you have focus? An annual plan, a strategic plan, mission, vision, and values. Once you have that platform, process, purpose, and plan, do you have the right people with the right passion to carry it out? And can you leverage all three of those things into performance and profitability? I mentioned at the beginning that we represent 200 brands from more than 30 countries. These logos are an indication of just some of the brands we represent. On this screen alone, you've got brands from the Philippines, Singapore, South America, Europe, UK, the Middle East, Australia, Indonesia. So quite a variety of brands. Excuse me. These brands on this list coming from China, again, Asia, South America, the Middle East. All of these brands are looking for partners in India. If you are interested in acquiring a franchise, please do visit our World Franchise Center, www.worldfranchisecenter.com. And I'm available at troy@worldfranchiseassociates.com. I really thank you for giving me the time to introduce this topic to you, and I hope you found it interesting and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Troy. It's wonderful presentation, and I think you were able to highlight a COVID situation in a very elaborate manner, and I think we thank you for that information. So. Uh, we've got some questions coming, but I never wanted to interrupt you, but we've kind of overshot on terms of time, but we still have time for uh, a few questions. Before I jump on to audience question, I have a few points that I wanted to sort of pick from your presentation. One of them being that you indicated on the economic crisis in past, and you've seen a very steep growth uh, in subsequent years, and you also IMF is also predicting that 2021 is going to be similar. So being an optimist, what is really a conscious advice to investors and franchisors at this time to plan about 2021? I mean, we know what's happening in 2020.
Yeah, so for franchisors or brand owners, my advice would be use this time to reflect on what you've learned and turn the challenge into an opportunity by improving the way you do business um, in this crisis so that you're stronger coming out of the crisis. For investors who are looking to acquire franchises, my advice would be that acquiring an international franchise or even a pan India franchise doesn't happen overnight. And and if you're in a situation where you know that you want to look at an opportunity in 2021, I wouldn't wait until January 1st. If you know that you're going to be resourced and you're going to be committed to investing in a franchise in 2021, start talking now. It takes months in some cases, to get to know each other and do the due diligence and look at those factors I mentioned in my previous during my presentation. And there's no harm in starting early and talking to people and analyzing and doing your due diligence. So most of these international franchise operators are in business. They're still looking at franchise opportunities. They're still recruiting, and would be happy to start a dialogue with you, even if we're looking at a Q1, Q2 2021 start.
Sure. That's a good advice that you start early, because it takes usually about 2 to 3 quarters to sort of firm up on a master franchise arrangement. There are quite a few of us here who are wanting to know about their expansion opportunities in APAC. So typically for Indian companies, what are the sectors that you think we would be exporters of franchise, and your advice when you probably some of them are wanting to expand in APAC region?
Great question. I think this part of this answer is a two-way answer. In other words, Asian companies have strengths that help them in India and vice versa. So if you're an Indian company who has expanded and achieved success in franchising in your country, you know how to operate in an emerging market with a low per capita average and high density. And your NCR region and your Greater Bombay, Bangalore, and some of these other major cities um, are not are much more similar to Jakarta, Bangkok, Manila, uh, and some of the Asian cities than they are to London and uh, and New York and Los Angeles. So the lessons you learn in how to make your business successful in India are very relevant for these emerging markets. As I mentioned, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam. These are countries that have some of the world's largest populations. Of course, not as large as India, but still in the top 10 to 15 in population, and very similar socioeconomic and and business challenges as you would have in India. So look at those markets. The other thing they have in common is that if you look at the median age, particularly Indonesia has one of the youngest median ages in the world, as does the Philippines, and it's a country that's ripe for businesses for the younger generation. And I think, you're in a very similar situation in India with your population. So a lot of those businesses that are appealing to that younger generation, I think would work well in the Asia Pacific.
And also some sectors that you could probably highlight, and what kind of an investment one should be sort of aiming at before one would embark on a APAC expansion.
Yeah. So sectors, I think, service businesses, children's related products, education. Um, I think health and wellness, some spa franchises, and potentially Indian Ayurvedic related business franchises could do well. And right now in the region, some of that is very mom and pop. There are large Indian populations in this region. Some of it has to do with the being former British colonies like India was, and a lot of Indian civil servants that came over with the British. But there are large Indian populations with and Indians with a lot of wealth in multiple countries who would potentially look at an Indian brand and see some cultural connection and find it interesting to bring to these countries. In terms of opportunities, I think Indian companies looking to expand in this region need to be looking for master franchisees and area developers, or at least city developers. You if you have a low cost franchise and you only license one or two of them, um, you won't be able to generate enough revenue, especially during the period where you have to build the business to cover your costs. So you need to find a strong, capable partner in each country or different regions of the country, and do multi-unit development. And franchise fees in the industry right now in Asia are ranging for country franchises from 100,000 to $500,000, depending on the kind of brand and the background and the size and reputation of the brand.
Sure. Coming more inward, when you look at India market, what kind of we've historically seen that people are not able to sort of both by their operational bandwidth and financial bandwidth. And many cases, there's been very little success of people buying a master franchise, but they typically look at a cluster franchise or an area franchise. While India is today a market everybody wants to enter in. But what's your advice to brands as well as investors who are potentially looking at a master franchise? You've done a lot of work. We did a lot of work together, and you did a lot of work in India already.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny you bring this up, because I can distinctly remember a conversation with Gaurav many years ago about candidates in India, and the conversation was that there are a lot of cash rich, energy poor investors in India that a first generation multimillionaire who's in the textile industry, whose kids have gone overseas and been educated in Oxford or Harvard or UCLA or big well respected university. They come home and they think, well, dad's business is a dirty business. I don't want to do that. I'll get into something sexy like the food business. Little do they know, the food business is 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's probably more difficult than the father's business. And they get into this, and it becomes kind of a social thing. Their friends are looking at it and everybody's excited. But when it comes to putting in the hard yards, they lose focus, and then dad has to step in and try to help them with the business. So you have to be careful with that. And I think the energy rich, cash poor uh, franchisee is also a problem, because they don't have the resources, and what you need is a balance of somebody that is somewhere with the scales are in the middle. They have both energy and enough capital, and that's uh, you know it's a jewel that's hard to find, so to speak, in the with along with all the stones. So
Yeah. So also, energy is a very relative term. When you look at your what region you're taken. So if you take a national role, many a times, you would require a lot more operational resources. But if you take a city-specific franchise, or you're able to sort of manage it in within the confines of your resources, whether it's your time and whether it's your financial bandwidth, I think that kind of has been, in our view, the best way to sort of look at acquiring international franchise. Uh, you mentioned, and you also mentioned that this should be probably the number one, and it was on the second slide in terms of categories, which is technology. Now, technology is changing everything. I mean, we both of us have been in this business for decades. You've been much senior to me, but I see in last 3-4 years the kind of technology and the kind of categories. Somebody's asking, whether electric vehicle is something that is a category for franchising, which is doing very well in India. So looking at these new age businesses, how are you seeing this transforming from a overall franchising scenario globally?
I mean, I think it's interesting. The electric motorcycle or bicycle or the vehicle. You know, I talked to a group out of India some time back that had this. It looked like a phone booth. You drive your motorcycle in it, and it washes your motorcycle. And that was, again, it's an application of technology to something that was done with a brush and a hose before, and and I think that if you are the creator of the technology, and that technology evolves into a brand, then I think that there's a platform for you to either franchise it, or in many cases, I use franchising and licensing interchangeably.
Yeah.
Some of the businesses we're talking about as franchises would maybe more suitable with the license. But if you have a brand that you have developed and built a very successful brand, but somebody else controls the technology, then you have to think very carefully about your relationship, the back end relationship, and whether if you start to grow it internationally, you can benefit from that technology in a way that's meaningful to you on a long-term basis, and whether you can assure your international franchisees that you've got access to that they have continuous access. I'll give you an example. Um, a coffee company in Vietnam that has a great product that wants to pair that with a instant coffee machine and start licensing these coffee machines in train stations and bus stations, and it produces an excellent product. And they have the coffee, but they don't control the machine. And so if they start licensing this internationally, and they have a dispute with the machine provider, or the machine provider gets greedy, it could put their franchise business and their relationships with their franchisees and their legal relationships on shaky ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think for a very long time, India has been seen as Ayurveda and textile and bunch of other categories. But I think technology is something which would be a game changer from an export opportunity for franchising. And brands like Oyo, I don't know if you know them, but they've become one of the top hoteliers in the world, just because a young IITian, which is one of the topmost technology colleges in India, produced this young guy who's still 26, and he's built, from Vegas to China to everywhere. He's built a great chain of restaurants. It's backed by a technology which kind of helps even transform modern businesses. And you also spoke about ghost kitchens and other platforms, which are essentially technology, how technology is disrupting and actually enabling, in a way, businesses. Croy, we've run out of time, but it's been phenomenal session. A great learning, great to sort of have you join us. And sorry for this change of time. I mean, it was last minute because a lot of us are joining on our trade show platform, and Gaurav, that's why we could sort of get him. He was trying to sort of get in, but I think he was preoccupied. But great learning. Thank you very much. Your last words, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. So thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to join you today. I apologize for going over. Sometimes I can be a little long-winded. I hope the topics and the things that I've covered were beneficial. Great to see you again. Please send my very best regards to your family. For the participants, thank you very much. I wish you all a great day and a great weekend ahead. And please do stay safe and remember that this crisis will this too shall pass. And all the best with your franchising endeavors in the future.
Thank you very much, Troy.
Thank you.
Great having you with us. Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
everyone.